We would love to invite you very early, so we would urge all speakers to keep it really short as possible. I know it's sometimes very hard, but if possible, please try to stick to the 8 minutes. Let me introduce very briefly our speakers. Michael Garcia, very well known. He's the chairman of the investigatory chamber of the FIFA Independent Ethics Committee. He's a lawyer by training, partner at Kirtland and Ellis in New York City, and as I mentioned before, he serves on the ethics chamber. Next to him is Roland Büchel. He's the member of the National Council of Switzerland, a very distinguished career as an entrepreneur, and a long and standing understanding about the topics we are talking about. He became, by the way, a member of the parliament, first in the canton of St. Gallen, and then he joined the National Chamber and Parliament in 2010. Long experience in sports as well, but I'm sure you will talk about this yourself. Peter Nunlist, he has his own company, very experienced in the financial environment. He started his career as a portfolio manager at UBS in '92 and then took on many different roles. Interestingly, when you read his CV, which I enjoyed very much, at the end you find reference to interesting books and to one slogan, which I would love to read to you: "Now are the good old days, after which we will yearn back in 10 years." And I think that's true. In sports as everywhere in life. I would love then to give the floor to Sylvia Cheng. Sylvia Cheng has, for me, a very interesting career because she observes the topic we are talking about from a civil society point of view. She has a long-standing career at Transparency International, but at the same time, she's an athlete herself, so she can observe and can talk about the items which are dear to our heart from a very personal and from a very professional point of view. Please read her CV. I think you will be deeply impressed. Next to her is Jo Leinen, a good, dear colleague of mine. We worked together in the European Parliament for many, many years. He's a lawyer by training. Before he joined the European Parliament. And in the European Parliament, he served in so many different roles and many different functions, very much respected by his colleagues and by the citizens in Germany. One I would love to highlight because he was the chairman for many years in the Environment Committee in the European Parliament, and he has a long-standing understanding about the importance of ethics. Mr. Garcia, you are the first. Please take the floor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Got my pictures there. Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to be here today and speak on important topics and also to listen to what such a distinguished panel has to say on these issues. In coming here today, I've been asked a number of questions about the process of the FIFA Ethics Committee. And I thought I would use the time that I have for my remarks to explain a little bit about it because I think it's somewhat misunderstood. The FIFA Code of Ethics is a strong one. It was enacted in 2012 and a lot of people had a lot of really good input into it. And it provides for a number of important things, changes. And one of them is that as chair of the investigatory committee, I get to decide which cases to open. I get to decide using my own discretion how far to take a case in terms of which issues to look at. And that's a very different provision than many other sports codes. In fact, a number of them have referral provisions limiting what investigatory chambers or groups can do, sometimes only by referral by the executive body, which can cause serious issues. Those are the provisions of the FIFA Code of Ethics that really give it force. Once those cases come in and are opened, we determine if there's a prima facie case. Obviously, we are also not a law enforcement body. We don't have subpoena power. We don't have power to compel. But we do have something else, and it's a very important tool, and that is the ability to get cooperation. And under the code, all football officials are required to cooperate with the investigatory chamber. And there are sanctions for failing to cooperate, and those have been very publicly applied recently. The investigatory chamber does not conduct criminal proceedings. The most serious sanction that we can impose, obviously, is a ban from football-related activity. FIFA's Congress and the Executive Committee decided that anyone who wants to work in football must abide by the Code of Ethics. For any official who's uncomfortable with that, anyone who provides false information or who refuses to respond to requests to assist in establishing the case, there is a simple alternative: leave. Working in football is not a right, it's a privilege, and that privilege should not be available to anyone who is unwilling to cooperate in efforts to enforce FIFA's Code of Ethics. Now, what happens after our investigations are done? I submit a report. It goes over to the other side of the ethics chamber, which is the adjudicatory chamber. Now, there's been a lot of talk recently about a particular report that went over to the adjudicatory chamber, and I think my colleague Judge Eckert from the adjudicatory chamber addressed this somewhat in his remarks. There are a lot of people, I think, who say, I have it, I've seen that report over someone else's shoulder. It went to FIFA, it went to the Secretary General. Here's what happened. That report was finished by my independent deputy, Cornell Borbely, and myself. We took that report. I delivered it to Judge Eckert in Munich with the record of that case. I sent it to Australia on an encrypted document to his deputy, independent deputy, Alan Sullivan. There are 4 people, to my knowledge, who have that report and who have seen it and who have access to the record. It now goes through the formal process of going to Judge Eckert, and he and his chamber will decide what happens next. What happens after? Generally, the adjudicatory chamber considers something. Another overlooked procedure, I think, is the fact that there is an appeal to the FIFA Appeals Committee if necessary. And one of the things under this code is that all parties have a right to appeal, including the investigatory chamber. And in the past, as is public, the investigatory chamber has appealed. And where we have respectfully disagreed with the adjudicatory chamber's decision, we appealed and we had a 7-year sanction, 7-year ban, turned into a lifetime ban by the appeals committee, and that's the natural process here. We've used the code, we've used the cooperation provisions, and we've made clear that all football officials are subject to the same rules. Completed reports have led to a number of bans, including life bans for 2 executive committee members. It's a robust code, and it's been implemented, I believe, in a fair and thorough way, creating a process over these past 2 years that's fair to all parties, as I've said before. But the process must lead to something else. And as I said when I took this job, when I assumed the role of chair, that the goal has to be instilling confidence in the process beyond any particular result, but beyond any particular case. The public, the stakeholders in this have to have confidence that the process is working in a fair way. So it brings me to, what do we think is still missing here? Why do we have something of a disconnect? And I think back to my days in the United States Attorney's Office in Manhattan, in an office that's generally considered one of the best in the United States. We had a very strong reputation in the public, and there was much public confidence in the work that was done. Obviously, we have a very strong criminal code. We have a very strong criminal procedure in the U.S. The office itself had a very good track record. And there was, as I said, great public confidence in its work. But I doubt that we would have enjoyed that confidence if we couldn't announce who had been charged with what. I doubt we would have enjoyed that confidence if the only record of the proceedings would be a name and a sentence, so that the press release would read, Joe Smith was sentenced today to 20 years for violating 18 United States Code 1922. There could be little support from a public that was so little informed. So I think what we need at this point is greater transparency into the process while continuing to protect the rights of all parties. Transparency into charges, into decisions, into the basis for those decisions, and into the facts. Those rules should apply whether it's a win or lose, because there's value in a system when announced charges are not upheld as well. There's value in a system when there's precedent, When adjudicatory decisions and appeals decisions provide guidance, there's value in a system that creates deterrence for others from violating the rules. Deterrence that's based more than just a sentence or a ban, but it's based on reading the facts of the case. That's the type of system that instills confidence in the stakeholders. And I hope as this code is studied and it's applied, and it may even be revised, that it will be possible to have that type of transparency, and that the work of the FIFA Ethics Committee can build that confidence in the process that must ultimately be the goal of enforcement of ethics in sports. Thank you.
Mr. Garcia, thank you so much for these very thoughtful comments, and I think the way you've concluded talking about transparency, I think this is something we are all struggling with in all institutions. Please, Mr. Bishop, you have the floor now.
Thank you very much. I have exactly 8 minutes, and so I won't speak about my sports experience, except maybe that I was working for ISL, that's a sports marketing company, which was paying 142 million Swiss francs in bribes to sports officials. I will not be able to shed light on all of the dark corners that exist in the areas of elections and events. However, I can give you an overview of the current situation and how it came about. I can give you my own perspective on the subject and say something about what is being done politically. The terms sports and ethics do no longer really fit together. That has less to do with a changed perception of ethics than with the unacceptable behavior of many sports officials in the governing bodies. Over the course of the last 30 years, these people, unfortunately, have succeeded in damaging the reputation of sports. I therefore agree with the people who say sport has not managed to shape commercialization in an ethically acceptable manner. Who is responsible? Commercialization takes place under the supervision of the umbrella organizations, always. It was not the work of the officials, but rather the result of an unexpected development in the market driven by television and other media. That is how the major international sports federations, FIFA, UEFA, the IOC, have become billion-dollar corporations in the entertainment industry. I don't see this as a negative aspect at all, in contrast to the opponents of commercialization. The problem is another one. There is a big divergence between the conduct of business of commercial sports and the type of business conduct which ethics would require. Without judging, one has to recognize that the problem started when sports leaders from South America and South European countries assumed office. Let me name 4 people in order of importance. First, Juan Antonio Samaranch, former president of the IOC, he's from Spain. Second, João Havelange, former president of FIFA, he's from Brazil. Number 3, Primo Nebbiolo, called Nebuloso, former president of the International Athletics Federation, he's from Italy. And Ruben Acosta, former president of the International Volleyball Federation, he's from Mexico. These gentlemen have spearheaded a development in sports which has led to vote rigging, nepotism, and corruption. And this has been increasingly noticed and widely discussed by the public. As a result, large-scale sports events are only reluctantly accepted in democratic countries, or they are even no longer accepted at all. Let me point out the 2 examples of Munich, Germany, and St. Moritz, Switzerland. In both places, the voters had their say, and they said, no, we do not want to host the Winter Olympics 2022. Why? They did not want to be part of the corrupt system. Nowadays, most big sports events are organized in countries with a significant democracy deficit. Simply due to the location of these major events, IOC and FIFA, as well as other sports federations, have become vulnerable targets. I give you some current examples of host countries. Russia, Winter Olympic Games this year, FIFA World Cup 2018. Qatar, FIFA World Cup 2022, maybe Mr. Garcia, and Belarus Ice Hockey World Championship this year. Kazakhstan is already beginning to emerge as an organizer of the Winter Olympic Games in the year 2022. This is another country which may well be an attackable target. Whenever you listen to them, you can hear the officials say that sports and politics must remain separate. However, when it comes to illegal betting and match fixing, the same official call out very loudly for government intervention. Yesterday, a meeting of 47 European sports ministers took place at the headquarters of the Swiss Ministry of Sports. They discussed measures to prevent and fight corruption in sports management. In the process, the European ministers zoomed in on various legal loopholes in the area of corruption and on a national and international level. The sports ministers did not only discuss about corruption within the sports federation, but 15 of them even signed the so-called Macklinger Convention against match fixing. Why Macklinger Convention? Macklingen is a small place close to the Swiss capital. It hosts the head office of Swiss sports ministry. Other signatures will follow. The European sports ministers know that actions speak louder than words. Therefore, match fixing will soon be a criminal offense in this and in many other European countries. In Switzerland, there is an intensive process underway. It aims to close the existing legal gaps. Let's just take one example. Changes in the money laundering law were voted by Swiss Parliament last week. All the leaders and even many employees of the international sports federations will soon receive a so-called PEP status. PEP stands for politically exposed person. FIFA President Blatter will be a PEP. His personal assistant will be a PEP. The members of the executive committee will be PEPs. Media official Walter de Gregorio, speaking in another room just now, will be a PEP. Other FIFA officials will be PEPs. What does it mean? Their bank account movements will have to be tracked and reported to the Swiss authorities. The same will happen to their family members. They will have the same status as the worst dictators on this planet. Let's come back from the dictators to the sports federations. Sometimes I ask myself why there is suddenly so much talk of ethics. Is it really happening due to a new understanding of the officials, of the inner circles of power? I doubt it. Ethics and transparency are the new buzzwords. But do they really have any particular impact? Will the sins of the past be atoned? And what about the sins of the present? The watches, Mr. Garcia? And the sins of the future?
I think your 8 minutes are
No. In the Sports Federation, there is a lot of talk of transparency and good governance. In reality, however, this transparency already ends at the salaries of the president and of the executive committee. What remains to be done? We need sports officials who really serve sport, instead of those who are in it for their own profit. Transparency is needed, and I'm speaking about true transparency. People don't want to follow leaders they don't trust. Dear sports officials, let me tell you this. It is natural that one loses credibility if one has made too many poor decisions and if one is constantly looking out for his own interest. However, people do follow leaders who take action. Think of the enthusiasm that Pope Francis awakened around the globe with his humility and modesty. The sporting world desperately needs someone like Francis to find a common ground with society again. And now the 8 minutes are over. Thank you.
Ethics and transparency, a new buzzword. I'm sure we will come back to this point. Next, Mr. Nunez, please.
Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I tried to give you a brief introduction into my area as I work as an independent asset manager. So, sometimes it's like the picture of the stadium you see here. Everything what I do is turning around the stadium. And yesterday we had a conference in Gstaad in the Swiss mountains of our industry to talk about the new regulations that will be massive in the next coming years. And as we stand there on the balcony and watch the beautiful mountains, someone said, "It's maybe the end of the world, but it's a beautiful place here." And yeah, that's a bit what we're fighting with in our function to control cash flows and transfers. So, next please. This is what I'd like to talk about the next few minutes. I want to reflect on common points between sports business and ethical guidance. And sustainability and trust are the basic of all of our client relationships. Let's begin with a few examples that are well known. These are fraud cases in our financial industry. So please switch off to the next slide, please. Maybe you're remembering Baring Bank, Nick Leeson, that was a derivative trader. He started to hide losses with in his secret accounts, and the losses accumulated and couldn't hidden up any longer. So the losses doubled, and Nick Leeson went to jail and the bank collapsed. The next example that you may be remembering well is that one here with Bernie Madoff. Madoff claimed to have a proprietary trading scheme, but it collapsed at the moment when the internet bubble burst, and it turned out to be a big Ponzi scheme. So Madoff went to jail for 160 years, but more to claim is the loss of over $65 billion that investors have lost in that fraud. But enough of this. These are clear criminal cases. But it is very unlikely that these people planning a criminal act. Most likely they were, in my opinion, at one stage to be a winner, maybe by good luck, and wanted or were forced to stay on the top. And at the end, they lost the game. Maybe at that point, I'm remembering a story once that I lived in my time during as a junior in a meeting with a former tennis manager called Jan Tiriak. Maybe some of you remember him. He was there and welcomed a few bankers. They were taking care of his money, and the Goldman Sachs manager arrived, and I had the chance to pick up a few words at the beginning of the meeting. So the Goldman Sachs guy stepped in and said, "Welcome, Mr. Tiriak. What can I do for you?" And Mr. Tiriak thought 1 second about that, and then he answered, "I give you 100 million and you give me 200 back." So that reflects under what pressure we are in the industry to give an answer to some client needs. Let's go to the core values. I mean, all of them, you know, and you have heard about them during the whole summit that day. And what, let me see. Yeah, and for me, the most important thing was the example that I said with these fraud cases. When you want to keep your winning image up, it can come to problems that we see probably on the next slide. Yeah, it can be that you work with employees which follows very low standards. We have to give a focus on that, and especially the example with our industry that I told you at the beginning from our conference. Legal behavior is not necessarily moral behavior. So let me give you probably an example. Yeah, when you play by the rules in a Swiss team in our Swiss National League, probably not the same rules are adopted in the Champions League. So here we face these problems with the US taxmen, which have another understanding of our Swiss banking secrecy. The last point is very important about emotions, because when we are involved in player transfers, of course, every entity is interested to create a transfer to the highest amount. So it's a bit similar to that what I live in my daily business when I deal with the stock markets. It's the same example. When a stock is going up, you become more and more into under an emotional pressure, and then it can become more and more dangerous to produce mistakes, and that's what's happening as well in this interaction with the sports connections and network. Always, my experience was always in the moment when the emotions were very high, people started to turn into, to produce mistakes in an unethical way, of course. Let's go to some thoughts, and maybe spend a few thoughts on where you might end up if your unethical behavioral is found out. As the example I given you before, you can lose everything. And give also some thoughts to how unethical criminal behavior came to be known. I mean, whistleblowers, investigation of mobile phones and emails, statistical analysis. We know the transfer matching system of the FIFA. Maybe Mr. Garcia can tell us about more later on. But in Japan, the Japanese wrestler, they had such a matching system as well. And due to statistics, they found out that they played against the rules. So to control all of that, maybe come back to the slide. It's really wise to play by the rules. That's probably a bit new as well for our industry here in Switzerland, but it was always like that. But it should be, in my opinion, be more transparent, like Mr. Büchel told us before. To follow my profession, it's the same. It ends up to choose better investment decisions for the clients. So I said, play the game like Messi. He's also playing by the rules, but he's the best player. That means, maybe last slide, please. That means that we really should focus on the client needs. And so I state with one sentence, ethic is not about avoiding criminal behavior, is in the first instance working in such a way as to act in the best interest of the customer. And I took that for my own company and decided with my team to focus more on that business with sportsmen and include some new ethical standards to really come up with good businesses without consequences. Thank you for your kind attention.
I took one item away, many interesting facets, but one I just would love to highlight immediately, and this was the slogan from winner to loser. I think there's some truth about it and adds some interesting, fascinating aspects to our debate. Quite often when one is on the top, when career is peaking, it's probably true that mistakes happen much easier. Mrs. Cheng, please.
Well, yes, thank you very much. I've been very impressed this afternoon by the intervention of David Walsh. He told us it's so important to take the side of the clean athletes, and I want to expand it. When I was a young athlete, I was a participant in the Olympic Games 1972 in Munich, and being a very young person, 20 years of age, it was a dream, and it changed into a nightmare within a very short moment. It was a dream of coming together with young people all over the world, sharing competition, sharing the experience of Olympic Games, and then it was a nightmare of the terrorist attack destroying everything. And since that moment, I knew and I know how vulnerable sport is. Sport can give hope, sport can destroy hope, sport can be used and sport can be misused. So I want to expand what David told us this afternoon. We have to take the side of those who trust in the values of sport, who have hope that sport really will contribute to a better world, like the Olympic Charter is saying, or as FIFA is saying, for the game, for the world. So that's the side we have to take. And I was very impressed by the presentation of Manon Schick from Amnesty International Switzerland on the migrant workers in Qatar and on the problem, the report Amnesty International made on the situation there. And what was very important, they were not just pointing to one institution being at the cause of this. It's not just FIFA, it's not just Qatar, it's the companies working there, making money out of it, and it's a whole society having been silent for such a long time on the situation there. And we have to admit that the World Cup brought the situation of the migrant workers into the focus of the world. So now, hope has been raised there. And I think it's the responsibility of all of us to help that this hope will be fulfilled and not the migrant workers will be forgotten again. I think that's very important to have this in mind too. So now allow me a few remarks on what we have discussed here today. We have heard a lot about the power and outreach of FIFA, of football, and I think this outreach, this economic political power football and FIFA and the football organizations all over the world have, it's a gift, but it's as well a curse. It uses people to be very close to football, close to FIFA. You can criticize FIFA one day and being happy to be invited to the home of FIFA the other day. Quite many people feel like that, I know that. So it's a tricky situation. And FIFA is raising hopes, a lot of hopes, and FIFA is making promises, but FIFA still does not live up to these promises. I think it's very important at this point to say it's not everything bad within FIFA, and not everybody working for FIFA as an official or as a staff member, whatever, or in football all over the world are bad people. That's not wrong. There is a public perception now that FIFA is all corrupt. I think that's not true. We have to look at it very detailed, very differentiating what's going wrong, but what's going good as well, within football, within FIFA. Otherwise, we will not help to change the situation. We just will bring people together within FIFA saying, oh, they are all attacking us, so that's the bad people outside, and we are the good ones. So we really have to look to the problems step by step, point by point, and not put it all into one and then take and then bang onto it. So what Mr. Daum said in the panel 1 hour ago, it's very important if you are in a difficult situation like he was, to have an analysis of your own mistakes and take over responsibility. So that's one point I'm still missing with FIFA. I think they achieved some very important issues with improving their statutes, improving the ethical commission, how they work on that. But still I'm missing from the very top an analysis of its own mistakes and to take over responsibility for what has happened the last 10, 15 years. I was a little bit astonished this morning hearing that Mr. Blatter very proudly was saying, oh, we already had an EC commission in 2004 for a very long time. Well, but what happened during this EC commission was working. What have they done? So it's nothing to be proud of to have an EC commission on the paper and some people being happy to be invited, maybe to the World Championship, but nothing really happening. Instead of it, they had one scandal after the other and just now started to look into it. So that's something that doesn't sounds like analyzing one's own mistakes. So that's a deficiency I still see within FIFA. And to regain credibility, it will be very important that from the top downwards, one really says, yes, that went wrong, and that is what we have to improve. I sometimes have the feeling nowadays that they want to prove efficiency by blaming and banning individuals. Yes, I admit, there are individuals who have to be blamed and banned because they did wrong within FIFA. There still are some, I think so. But it's not just about individuals. It's about the system and it's about the culture. I'm a lawyer myself, so I think rules and laws are quite important, but they are not all. And just to change the rules, just to change laws, doesn't change the situation. You need to work on the culture too, and that's something what has just started in FIFA, and there's still a lot of work to do, and it's not just about FIFA. I think FIFA is a symbol for quite many other organizations in sport. There are sport organizations doing worse than FIFA, but there are as well sport organizations doing better, and I think we have still a long way to go. What we need, so, is a change of culture. We need transparency. We heard it quite often today, but just to talk about transparency doesn't really bring transparency. You need real steps. We need more openness. We need more of a discussion culture within sport organizations, within football. And if it's about transparency, I think it's very important, and I have to say it here now, to publish the report, or at least the reasoning decision on the Garcia report on what happened with Qatar, with all these allegations we heard about such a lot in the last months. Without transparency on this, with just banning, perhaps punishing some individuals, and then saying, oh, we did a good job, and now we are clean, FIFA will not regain credibility. They will not regain trust. It will be really a failure in the end. So I think it's very important that this is made public, that people can understand who has been punished, why, and who has been punished not, and why. So that's important, and I want, at the end, link our workshop on corruption off the pitch, that is on the governance of sport, to the other workshop just going on in another room on corruption on the pitch. The fight against match fixing. And everybody nowadays, in football and outside football, is convinced they have to fight match fixing because there's organized crime involved and there's so many things going wrong. But the fight against match fixing cannot be won if you don't have credibility at the top of the sport organizations. How will you tell a young player to stick to the rules? We heard a lot about rules and how important it is to stick to them. How can you tell that a young player if the leadership of a federation doesn't stick to the rules itself? If there is a feeling there is no fair play, there is no transparency at the top of sport organizations, that will never work. So that's why it's so important to fight against corruption off the pitch, to improve governance in sport organizations, for as well have clean sports on the pitch, on the bicycle, wherever. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Very strong plea for cultural change at FIFA. Jo Leinen, please.
Yeah, when I told my assistants weeks ago that I go to Zurich, to the FIFA headquarter, with a conference that has the topic ethics in sport. I don't know how you think they reacted. There was a huge laughter. And the one of them was even warning me yesterday, say, you are not going there. You will lose your image. Don't make any photo. Be on no photo, he said. You're losing your image. And it makes me really sad because I was a football player for 25 years. And of course, we have discussed it, what the big role and function sport and football, but the others as well have in modern society. So I can continue where Sylvia was finishing. It is difficult to get credibility, but very quickly you can lose it. And then it's a long, long way to get it back. And maybe some of the accusations that are now focusing on the top of FIFA and on FIFA are a bit unjust, but something as well happened in the last 10, 20 years, where people have the feeling, yes, they are corrupt. They are not playing according to the rules. They are being even connected to doubtful elements. And I hope very much that FIFA itself has the power and the will to clean up this mess. And I'm very happy, and I praise all those who have contributed to our summit here, because that is another mosaic in this long way to come out. And the Garcia report will be the next step where the whole world is looking, what they have found and what the conclusions are. Erika was saying that I worked in the parliament for years on ethics in politics. We have, let's say, as members of a transnational parliament, 28 nations, different cultures, political cultures. We are blamed as well, constantly, that in Brussels it is intransparent, that we have 15,000 lobbyists, and that legislation get influenced by doubtful means. And we have set up, with a high-level group, a whole system, code of conduct. I mean, this is the basic thing, it's paper, but then the lobby register to have the data, to know who is a lobbyist, who is really lobbying around politics, our institutions. And it was so far voluntary, but the success was already big, because we threatened that those who are not signing, that they will be excluded from invitations, from hearings, so they lose, let's say, their ground on which they are working. And we will make in the new legislature it binding, that everybody who wants to influence or have to dialogue with politics has to be registered in the lobby register that is online, so that every citizen, it's transparent, can see who it is. And even now, some have been astonished how much money is invested to lobby politics. And I could say that this transparency, this information should exist around sports as well. It should be existing, the database and the transparency. We went even a step further, so we do legislation, and there is a legislative footprint, still voluntary on those who do it. I think we have to make it mandatory as well, that you put on internet with whom you had a really deep conversation about a legislative act, and get it as transparent as possible. And I think in Europe we try to have a good governance and be free of unfair games. I know that some colleagues from the Council of Europe are here, Michael Connaty and others. You had a conference parallel because the Council of Europe is doing a lot against corruption and unfair games in sports. And I think and I hope that at least on this continent we can fight these dangers of the sports world being really affected by criminal elements, and that organized crime goes into the sports sector because there's so much money that they could win. We have to have that fight by all means. And Roland Büschel, member of the Swiss Parliament, was quite outspoken. We in the European Parliament, we had different resolutions against corruption in sport where we urge our governments, the Commission, even to come up with legislation, if it doesn't help, that we get criminal law to fight it. And I would say there should be zero tolerance with corruption and match fixing and all these things. Zero tolerance. If you find somebody unrespective of his position, it should be punished. And during the World Championship in Brazil, at least for the German audience, it was quite remarkable that FIFA banned our Messi, Mr. Beckenbauer, to go on any sports grounds for weeks, and then he came in to answer the questions, and there was already, hello, they do something. Hey, good, Beckenbauer is the god in Germany in football, and that's the way to go. No respect who it is, how much Champions Leagues he or she has won, World Cups won. You have to clean up the field, and then I think there comes trust back, there comes credibility back. And if I come again in 10 years, I hope my assistants will applaud me and say, yes, go to FIFA. They set the role model, and they did it. I wanted to make two remarks, but very short. We have a transfer sector. I'm not an expert, but we heard from you a lot of money. It is really hurting my heart to see that young boys, young girls, mainly boys in football, are handled in this way where, I don't know, it's, this morning somebody said modern slavery is a bit hard word, but something is wrong in the transfer market and transfer system. We have seen it in the banking system, where bonuses just let bankers to make the wrong decisions. And I don't know whether transfer agents should have a set rule where they make a balanced decisions and not being indicted by bonuses to make the wrong ones. And the very last one, big sports events. And Mr. Büschel was saying it, are we only have the chance to go to dictatorial and authoritarian states because only then can squeeze the citizens to pay all the money. Munich has refused. We have now the debate whether Berlin or Hamburg would host Olympic Games, and you have a huge resistance in the public area to say, no, we don't want it. Why should we invest so much money for 3 weeks, and then you have the stadiums and you have all the stuff that is useless? So I think FIFA, as the IOC, have to rethink the World Games. Thank you.
Thank you. This was practically another plea for changing culture. I'm just checking quickly how much time do we have. We started a bit late. Can somebody give me a sign? I would love to take one question, short, brief, and no, 10 minutes. Wonderful. And I would love to give Mr. Garcia A little bit more time to reply because we're talking about fairness. 4 against 1, so he should have the fairness at the end to reply. Please, would you be so kind and introduce yourself?
Sure, should I stand up or sit down? What would you like?
Stand.
Stand
Right.
would be much nicer.
Hi, my name is David Larkin. I'm an international sports attorney. I also am co-director of an organization called Change FIFA. My question is to you, Mr. Garcia. You know, as we go through this ethics process, what I've looked to try to guide kind of the look and feel of the process has been the police model codes, right? So you've got a pseudo-police role, and then, you know, to try and get guidance, because, you know, this is a new area, and we're all trying to navigate it. So as we look to the police codes, what they say is they say, you shall not associate with people who have a notorious reputation. You shall not associate with people who have allegations of impropriety. And so, in that sense, the problem that I think a lot of fans have is they wonder, right? And they say, well, Mr. Garcia works for FIFA, right? And he's beholden to this group that have, some have serious allegations of impropriety that surround them. And then the other thing, you know, with regards to Judge Eckert, is you look at the Model Judicial Code of Conduct, and you say, what does it say? And it says that what undermines public credibility is not just the appearance of bias, you know, or not just bias, but the appearance of bias, right? And so we, the fans, are left thinking, how can we have faith in a process where it does not look like we have the safeguards that are set out in the criminal system? They're not here in sport. So why should the fans have faith in the process? And doesn't it kind of set up a process where we don't get to an answer that the public has faith in? And you know, to your credit, aren't you kind of set up with a system where you can't win whatever you decide?
Thank you so much. The question was very clear.
What is the question? I think there's a lot in, and I don't mean to.
Can I take one more and then we finalize?
I'll never remember that.
Okay, then go back immediately. I know this feeling, please.
I think there's a lot of different parts to your question, so I'll try to answer as many as I can remember. Do I need to use a mic? No, right?
Is it fine? Can you give us a sign?
I think first, if you look at the police codes, I think your rules apply to people who are on parole, shouldn't associate with known felons. So as far as I know, I'm not on parole. But I think that the bigger issue there is the relationship between a prosecutor or an investigator and this body. And I think that's a real issue. I think in the US, there's a little bit more of an understanding of that because we have employed these models of monitors. You know, so, you know, I know you're an attorney in your field, you can get hired to be a monitor, and the company technically hires you because who's going to pay you to do that job, right? But are you an employee? No, I'm not an employee. Are you the company's lawyer? No, you're a monitor of that company, and in a lot of cases you report to the Department of Justice or some other regulatory authority as a monitor who's being paid by the company. So if there's any analogy in the law that I would see, and again, I think it's maybe easier in places that have more of these types of things. It's more of a monitorship kind of relationship. So yeah, there's always the fact that you get paid or whatever, you get by the company or the institution, but you can still be independent. And I think that's a difficult concept, and you have to obviously watch the lines, but I think that's what is here. Now, on the transparency issue, I agree that I think a process gains public confidence by what it makes public. Mm-hmm. And if you're limited severely in that, and I didn't write this code, but you got to follow it if you're enforcing it, I think that there's a very limited amount that can get out, and I think that's a disservice in many ways. Because, you know, people are skeptical and people want information, and it's people's jobs to get information and inform the public. And I understand that, and I think there needs to be we really need to look at that balance. And again, protecting the rights of the parties and the others involved, which everybody agrees with. But there needs, I think, to be a calculation of that process, which hopefully, I believe the more you see of it, the more it would instill a confidence, add in the process, maybe not in a particular result you disagree with. So I think those are all very good points. I think, in terms of the adjudicatory chamber, I would let Judge Eckert answer for himself in terms of how that relationship plays out on the bench analogy. But I think this, look, no way is going to be perfect. No monitorship is perfect. No, but I think this is a very strong code that, it's been made a point here many times today, I'm sure, that you can label something whatever you want. And you can label a chair independent or a deputy chair independent. But then you look at what does the code give that person to make them independent. And I think you've got a couple of things here that are pretty good. Like the ability to open cases whenever you want, like the ability to compel people to cooperate in this building, and how you use those tools that can support your independence, I think will be the test of the system at the end of the day.
The gentleman over there, please do us a favor, keep it very short, your question. Would you be so kind?
Sure.
It's nicer for all of us. Yeah. Thank you.
My name is Roland Jack from a company called I Trust Sport. We've heard about the need for improving trust in some of the officials involved in sports organisations. So what role do any of you think there might be for integrity tests for individuals who perhaps are running for election or in senior positions in sports organisations?
Thank you. Okay, I think we should come to an end. Anything you would love to say? I would love to give you the last
word. I'll answer that one because it's the easier one.
Sure.
Then I think what you want me to say.
But maybe you want to go beyond and want to reflect on that.
I think that, integrity checks are difficult and they're pretty limited. I don't think there's no harm in doing them. But I think the real value of an integrity check, and I think that will be established over time, is you lock people into certain answers. And then if there are statements in that integrity check that are false, later on there can be repercussions that are clear-cut. The lines are clear in terms of an enforcement action violation because you've made statements now as to what your history is or what this is. So I think to that extent they're useful. I think in terms of how much can you really delve, look, I had very detailed clearances and other things when I had jobs and I knew people, we all have read stories of people in the intelligence agencies who have problems. I'm sure their background and integrity checks are pretty good. So I think, the value of it is for later in my view, and that's probably just from my perspective. Okay, I would love to come to an end. Maybe just a few points to take away. And I personally, I think I took away that all organizations have a hard time. Most organizations at least. And the challenge, once you face hard times, how you transform and how you come out of it is probably as important as the process itself. I think we're still at a quite early phase, and certainly your report will help, hopefully, to move things along in the right way, in the right direction. Let me thank all the speakers here, and please join me in thanking them.